Dave here with another side dish that could be a meal in itself. I had this cauliflower in the refrigerator for about a week and decided to do something different. This will be a gratin of epic proportions, so let's get started by cleaning it up. I like to use a paring knife for this, and I start by cutting around the base to remove the leaf stems. As you open this, you will expose the interior where you can see the flowerets connect to the main stalk. Begin cutting off the flowerets one at a time until you have them all. We don't want them very big though, so we'll need to make them smaller. The larger ones should be cut into quarters as you see here. You can make them smaller even still, because these will be held together with the bechamel sauce coming up shortly. Next, drizzle some olive oil over the top and bake at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes, turning once. Now it's time to prepare the cheeses. Here we have some Parmigiano Reggiano, and we're going to grate some into this bowl here. There's no exact amount. I usually cook by eyeballing things, so I'm going to go ahead and grate some of this stuff. And I'm not going to grate it all. I'll come back and grate some more later. But I just want to show you what the consistency is when you use this type of microplane. It comes out nice and stringy. Do you see that? That's going to melt up beautifully in our sauce. Next, we'll want to grate a different cheese, and this will be used primarily as a topping. And what I have here is some sharp cheddar. I happen to like cheddar. But this recipe comes out exceptionally good if you use a Gruyere or a good imported Swiss cheese. So go ahead and shred it. I would say probably about 1.5 cups to 2 cups. Again, I don't use exact measurements when I cook like this. I think that what I have there is going to be plenty. So gather it all up, and we'll get on to the next step, which is to make a bechamel sauce. Alright, now every bechamel starts with a roux, and most people will tell you do a 1-to-1 ratio on the fat to flour. I prefer to do 3 tablespoons of butter and just over 2 tablespoons of flour. I find it much easier to work with. And remember that when you're working with a roux, you have to know what it is you intend to do with it. If you were going to make a brown gravy, you'd cook this longer until it's almost brown and add beef broth. But for our sauce, we want to add milk. So we don't want to cook it until it's brown, just until we've taken the raw edge off the flour. So this shouldn't take any more than 2 minutes, after which time you'll add some milk. And you're going to add the milk cold and all at once. Don't listen to all that dribble about adding the water, the milk a little bit at a time. No. Add it all at once and make sure it's cold. There's a science behind this, and basically what happens is when you throw that cold milk into a hot roux, it immediately cools off the roux, no lumps will form, and then as it comes back up to temperature, it will melt and disperse evenly throughout the milk. You'll end up with a nice, smooth roux. Trust me on this, it works. And you will always check for thickness. Sometimes you want it thin, sometimes you want it thick. In this particular case, I want it to be a little bit thinner because I know that I'll be adding cheese to it, which is already thick, correct? You add something thick to something thin, it's going to balance back out again. So I thinned it out with a little bit of milk and then season it with a little bit of black pepper. Fresh black pepper, you know me. And then of course we'll want to throw in about 3 pinches of salt. And in case you didn't know, a pinch of salt is about equivalent to 1/4 teaspoon. And of course, this is kosher salt. Give that a mix. Oh, look at that beautiful pepper. Gotta love it. All right, and then we'll add our Parmigiano Reggiano and just a little bit of that cheddar cheese that we'll be using as a topping. Give that a quick mix. It will melt very quickly. So turn up the heat and remove it from the heat. And then we'll check on the start of the show, right? The cauliflower. Now that was in there for about a half an hour, and you'll see that it has some nice little browning tips on the flowerets, and that's exactly what you want. But I felt that it was not cooked quite to where I wanted it. I want it to be al dente. So go ahead and pop that back in the oven for about 10 minutes and recheck. And when it's al dente, it's ready, because it will finish cooking in the bechamel sauce. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead, season that with a little bit of salt, because I never did salt it up front. And then we'll go ahead and add the bechamel sauce in. And remember, this also has pepper, a little bit of cheese, a pinch of nutmeg, a lot of delicious stuff in there, okay? And make sure that as you pour this over, you pour it as evenly as possible, because there are a lot of nook and crannies to fill, all right? And you could shake the pan, and you could do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that the cauliflower is pretty much submerged in the bechamel. And you want peaks forming, or see bits of the cauliflower sticking out on top. So if you feel that you don't have enough sauce, then go ahead and add a little bit of cream. This is light cream. It's the same stuff that I use for coffee. And I'm going to use that just to fill in some of those little nooks and crannies that you don't see. Go ahead and pat that down a little more and spread on the cheese. Again, you want to be liberal with the cheese. You want to completely cover it. And I'm a real fuss budget when it comes to doing things like this. I like to make sure that everything is covered, every little corner, every little thing, That's just the way I am. All right? And then we're going to finish that with some breadcrumbs. And these are plain breadcrumbs. I'm using the ones that come in those tall cardboard tubes. You could use homemade breadcrumbs as well. Remember, though, that the texture would be different, and you need to adjust accordingly. Okay? And again, right to the corners, right to the edges. Make sure that's covered, because this is going to form a crust. It's almost like making a pie crust, in a way. In fact, this is how you make macaroni and cheese. And it tastes like macaroni and cheese. It really does, except it's made with cauliflower instead of macaroni. And after about 30 minutes in the oven, this is what it looks like. It has a nice crust on top, okay? And some of that cheese melted down into the cream, so we have a very cheesy, creamy sauce. And for this particular meal, I'm serving chicken per salad. And if you would like to know how to make chicken per salad, I will put a video out for that in the near future. So here we go. We're going to plate some up. You see that steam coming out of there? Do you see how that cream just sticks all those little pieces of flourette together, and you have that nice delicious crust on top? This is just like macaroni and cheese, isn't it? Only a tad healthier. And we'll go ahead and we'll put some of that chicken on the plate. Let me tell you something, folks. This is like super high calorie food, but no worse than going out to a restaurant. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you join us each week for more great videos made for people who like to cook. Until then, bon appetit.